In 1910, construction workers sealed a breach in the subterranean foundations of the Paris Opera and filed no formal report about what they had found inside. The chamber they encountered appeared on no architectural drawing Charles Garnier had ever submitted. It had no door. It had no designation. It had, by every piece of official documentation governing one of the most rigorously bureaucratized buildings in France, never existed. What was inside it suggested otherwise. What follows is a reconstruction drawn from incident reports, letters, personal testimonies, and administrative records. Documents buried in secondary registries, filed in archives that no routine audit was designed to reach, or left in private correspondence that found its way into the historical record by accident. The man at the center of these records is referred to in most of them obliquely, if at all. He had no official employment. He received no salary. He held no title. He simply lived there, in the dark, beneath one of the most famous buildings in the world, for what the physical evidence suggests was several decades. And the building, for reasons that will become apparent, preferred not to acknowledge that this had happened. The renovation project that began in 1907 was a structural necessity. The Opéra Garnier, completed in 1875, required reinforcement at its lower levels. The lake beneath the fifth basement, the mechanical vaults, the labyrinth of storage corridors that existed in a permanent state of semi-official disorganization. Workers were accustomed to finding things that had been lost. They were not accustomed to finding things that had never been officially placed. The breach occurred in the third week of excavation. A foreman broke through what had been cataloged as a load-bearing partition and found, on the other side, air that was dense in a way sealed spaces are not dense. Not stale. Occupied. The room beyond was not large, perhaps 5 meters across, but it contained a pipe organ of significant complexity, assembled from salvaged and cannibalized components that appeared to have been sourced across a period of years. Furniture, a bed, a workspace, personal effects whose arrangement suggested regular, habitual use. The foreman filed a one-line incident report before the end of his shift. He tendered his resignation the following morning. No official photograph was commissioned. The administrative record of the discovery was routed into a secondary registry under a filing category that no routine inspection was designed to examine. The chamber was resealed. The project continued. No explanation was entered into the record for why a chamber of this nature existed, or who had occupied it, or for how long. There are 3 separate documented occasions on which rehearsals in the upper levels of the opera were brought to a full stop by a sound that rose through the floor. The descriptions are consistent across sources who had no contact with one another. The sound was not music in any ordinary sense. It carried pitch and resonance that matched no instrument in the orchestra pit and no human voice any of the witnesses had previously encountered. It entered not through the ear, but through the sternum, a vibration felt in the teeth and behind the eyes. One cellist, writing to her sister the evening after one such incident, described the certainty that the building was attempting to communicate something she had been too frightened to understand. The man who produced this sound had spent what appears to have been decades studying the acoustic architecture of the opéra from the inside, not from blueprints, from direct contact, lying flat against stone floors at different levels, mapping the pathways through which sound moved the way a physician maps the circulatory system, by tracing what it did when the instrument was fully functioning. He knew which wall would carry a whisper to which ceiling. He knew which vault would expand a single sustained note into the convincing illusion of an entire choir. The voice was a precision instrument. It was also, by every available account, the most extraordinary human voice anyone who heard it had ever encountered. And the man who possessed it had nowhere to perform. The mask he wore was pale leather, fitted to the left side of his face. It had been commissioned when he was 4 years old, not by him, but by his mother, who found herself unable to look directly at her son without covering her own eyes first. The face beneath was not disfigured in the way that word implies damage to something that was previously whole. It had not been burned or struck or ravaged by illness. It had simply been refused, at formation, the architecture that human faces ordinarily receive. The nose was absent in any conventional sense. The eye sockets were driven too deep. The skin bore the color and texture of materials that have been under sustained pressure for a very long time. Pale, taut in the places flesh should have give. Those who glimpsed it, stagehands, one physician who had treated a minor wound on his forearm, a seamstress who rounded a corridor without warning, described almost uniformly the same secondary phenomenon, a stillness in the air beside him. Not metaphorical, physical, as though the body standing there was holding in reserve some fundamental decision about how fully to be present. He wore the mask to sleep. He wore it in rooms where he was entirely alone. He wore it in the chamber beneath the opera where no one had ever seen him and where no one was ever going to come. The chamber was resealed in 1910, and the record of what it contained was filed in a place no one was expected to find. But the record existed. The pipe organ existed. The bed with its decades of compression existed. A man had lived beneath one of the most observed buildings in the world, and the building had simply elected not to notice. In the next chapter, what he built in the deepest vault was not a home. It was a room designed to end a person. And the night he finally used it, he gave the woman inside a choice that had no good answer. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. See you in the next one.